Hello, I'm Alexander Miramontes, and today I will be presenting Lab 1 from my Physics 2212 class. To start, I will start with the purpose, which is to determine approximately how much excess charge is on one piece of tape that is uncharged in relation to another tape. At the beginning of the lab, we had to make two types of tapes, which one was a base tape and one was the U tape. Both were 20 centimeters in length. After that, the U-tape was attached to the end of the desk, and when a hand came near, it was attracted to it. Later, I used two U-tapes, which resulted in them repelling one another. Then I put a neutral object near a U-tape, which resulted in attraction. Then I later deduced that the U-tape was positively charged since I brought near a negatively charged item, which was a clear plastic pen. Before I continue on with the model, I need to clear some questions that are associated with the lab. One is, what is the length of one of your pieces of tape, which was 0.2 meters. The other was, cleared tape is around 1 gram per meter. What is the mass of one of your pieces of tape, which I calculated to be around 0.00015 kilograms. The float distance that I measured was around 0.01 meters. The magnitude of the gravitational force on the floating piece of tape was 0.00147 newtons. And lastly, the magnitude of the electric force on the floating tape was 4.08 times 10 to the negative 8 Newton coulombs. With that out of the way, I can now continue with the model. In the top right of the code, I laid out the constants used in the computational model, which is the K value, the electron value, the gravitational value, the mass of the tape in kilograms, the float distance, and the length of the tape in meters. After that, I calculated the forces needed for the model, those which would be the gravitational force and the electric force. Then I had the equations ready for the point charges and the external forces. These equations would calculate the total charge on the tape and the amount of excess charge on the tape. The rest of the code just establishes the visual model, which would be the point charges and the arrows representing the gravitational force and the electric force. When I ran the code, the following model appears. The point charges represent the pieces of tape, with the top one experiencing the forces. The arrows would represent the forces, with the top one representing the electric force and the bottom one representing the gravitational force. Before I go on to talk about the what-ifs in the lab, I have to answer some related questions with it. The magnitude of the charge on one piece of tape is 4.04 times 10 to the negative 9 coulombs, and the assumptions I had to make to get the approximate amount of charge on the floating tape would be I had to treat the tape as a point charge with all the charge at the center of the tape, and that each U-tape had the same amount of charge that was evenly distributed. Also, the fundamental physics principles that were used were Coulomb's law, which quantifies the amount of force between two stationary electrically charged particles. Then the electric field, which is a field that surrounds electrically charged particles and exerts force on all other charged particles in the field. Then Newton's second law, which is that the acceleration of an object depends on the mass of an object and the force applied. The force of gravity, and then an electric polarization, which refers to the separation of the center of positive charges and the center of negative charges in a material, which would create a dipole. Now, to answer one of the what-if questions proposed in the lab, which is, what if electrons had positive charges and protons had negative charges? What would change about observations made? Well, the observations and the conclusions reached with them will not change, since the logic and the physics will still be valid. All it would really be would just be that you're changing the name, nothing else. A why question was also proposed in the lab, which is, why is it important to handle the charged tape as little as possible? What happens when charged tapes contact each other or contact other objects? Well, the tape had excess electrons, and any contact made will result in losing some of the excess as they could transfer over to another object. And with that, the distance would decrease, and therefore the electric force would decrease